A white-hot Cuda is our muscle car of the week. There's a lot going on when you look at an AAR Cuda. The reason why this car exists is primarily because of Trans Am racing. The SCCA, which was the Sports Car Club of America, had what was called the Trans Am series. And basically these were road races that were held in different tracks all over the country. Dan Gurney was the owner of the All-American Racer team, and Gurney was basically an American hero. He'd been a very successful race driver in Formula One racing around the world, at the Indianapolis 500. He also raced in NASCAR. So in '67, Dan Gurney campaigned a Mercury Cougar with Parnelli Jones. He ran that again in '68 and '9. But for 1970, the Dan Gurney All-American Racer team was going to be campaigning this new for 1970 Plymouth Cuda. So the car was a brand new car for '70. It was a new partnership between Gurney and Chrysler. And when we see the car, an AAR Cuda stands for All-American Racers. And outside of maybe Shelby, I'm not sure there's any other American muscle car that was branded after a race team. You know, you had the Pontiac Trans Am, which was named after the series. Of course, the Challenger TA, which was, everybody knows the TA stands for Trans Am. It was named for the series. On the Chevrolet side, you didn't see a Mark Donohue edition Camaro. You saw the Z28, which was the package that was raced in Trans Am. There was a Donohue Javelin that was raced and sold to the public as such. But I think the AAR is the best example of a team-badged muscle car. And when you look at the AAR Cuda in the production form, the rule book said in order to certify a car to be Trans Am legal, all the elements that were on the production car had to appear on the race car. For example, the rear wing. If you had the rear wing in the production car, the race car had to have a similar style rear wing. I think the AAR street version actually looks a little bit better than the race car. One thing they did share is the side exiting exhaust, but really the AAR Cuda for the street was kind of its own animal. The SCCA made another rulebook change for 1970 regarding the engines. These cars used to have a 5-liter or 305 cubic inch mandate to where if the production version did not have a 305 or smaller, you couldn't race it in the Trans Am Racing Series. So here we see the Camaro Z28 with the 302. We see a Boss Mustang with the Boss 302. These were designed to be legal in SCCA Trans Am. For 1970, the SCCA said you could run a larger engine in the street car, provided it could be de-stroked with factory part numbers to be able to run in SCCA. And that's what Dan Gurney and Swede Savage raced throughout 1970. While it's true that the vast majority of these cars were never actually raced, because that would take some suspension modifications and safety stuff to make it competitive, that didn't stop the average guy from buying one and living out their racer dreams to and from work and on the weekends. Now these AAR Cudas were built between March 10th, 1970 and April 17th, so it was only about a 5-week production run. But the other thing that's interesting is the very first Trans Am race for 1970 was held at Laguna Seca on April 19th, just a couple days after the AAR street version Cudas were all produced. And this was all carefully timed out between the SCCA and the automakers, because the SCCA rulebook, sure, it said that there had to be 2,500 street versions to make the race car legal, but at the same time, the manufacturers knew that people loved the Trans Am series. Dan Gurney himself in an interview once said that he thought Trans Am was so popular primarily because people could identify with these cars. The cars looked very much like the street versions. Sure, the color was different, they were lowered, and they had racing wheels and tires and stuff. But the overall shape was very similar to what you could go down to your local dealership and buy. So the automakers looked at Trans Am as a great vehicle to sell vehicles. And that's another reason why they got involved with it. And anytime the automakers could race basically against themselves through factory-backed teams, it provided great competition between the automakers, which made for another great selling story. Now, unfortunately for Dan Gurney and Swede Savage, financial cutbacks in 1970 meant that they only had a one-car team, so Swede Savage did all the driving. And Savage didn't lose a lot of races, but he didn't finish a lot of races either. The first time out, I think they came in 5th place, and then the next 4 or 5 races, they didn't even finish. In typical 1970 Plymouth fashion, color and appearance was just as important as performance. And our car is wearing color code EW1, which is called Alpine White, and it really showcases the vivid blacked out treatment and graphics on the AAR. We've talked about how cool this AAR Cuda is. This one's also unique being in white. They think maybe 3 or 4% of these things were finished in white. It also has a black vinyl top, which makes it kind of unusual for an AAR. But of course, under the hood is another reason why these cars are so cool. It is a small block, 340 cubic inch V8. It's got J-casting cylinder heads, which were unique to this car, which had oversized valves, a unique rocker arm and push rod assembly, a special intake manifold with 3 2-barrel Holley carburetors sitting on top. These were a 10.5-to-1 compression engine, making 290 horsepower at 5,000 RPM and 345 foot-pounds at 3,400 RPM. This car has an automatic Torque Flight 727 transmission and a 355-to-1 rear gear with a locking rear differential. So it could be a drag race car, but it's more set up to be something that you race around turns. This car's bad to the bone from any angle, and you can share it with your pals on Facebook or on our webpage at MuscleCarOfTheWeek.com. Are you a YouTube subscriber of our channel? If not, you're just a click away. I guess we'll see you next time on Muscle Car of the Week.